welcome to today's video. Today is a fun one. I'm going to be taking you through all of the journals that I'll be using this year. I'm not really going to go in depth into each individual journal because then this video would be probably 3 hours long. And honestly, if you're going to watch 3 hours of something, go watch Lord of the Rings. I think that would be a much better use of your time. But I'm essentially going to go over what I use each notebook for, as well as a couple details on the actual notebook itself and what's in the notebook, that kind of stuff. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe and join the family if you haven't already. I am happy to have you here, and let's go over what journals I'm using for 2020. I think I'll start with just a bit of background on why I use multiple notebooks and journals. I'd first like to start by putting it out there that I only use one agenda, and that is this one. I use a bullet journal, so I'll mention that a bit more when I talk about this specific notebook, but I do not find keeping daily plans in separate notebooks works well for me. I really prefer to keep everything in one place. The second thing is that I only really started with one journal before I separated it into multiple ones. My bullet journal, if I had to pick one of these notebooks to use, and if I had to let the rest of them go, I would pick this one because this one is the most important. The main reason why I decided to use some other notebooks to supplement this one was for a couple reasons. Either because the information is really private and I didn't want it on the go with me and vulnerable to being lost, or it was a situation where the information wasn't being referenced every day and it took up a big chunk of my journal. So it was something that I could easily put into a separate notebook, keep that at home, and then it's kind of a win-win situation because I'm not filling up this journal with a ton of information I don't need to reference, and then it's also all in one place at home, so it's all together, which is really nice. I'm just gonna move these over to the side in a very nice, artful way. My first journal that I'm using for 2020 is an actual journal. This is just a place for me to record my thoughts really freely and just get stuff out of my head in order to clear my mind. So this is actually a pocket-sized traveler's notebook. A traveler's notebook essentially means that there's little strings on the inside of the leather piece, and you can strap individual notebooks into it, which is really helpful because as you fill up notebooks, you can just take the notebook out and replace it with another one, so you're not having to buy a whole new cover. So this cover is actually a cover by the brand Foxy. Unfortunately, this specific cover is discontinued, but in case you find the cover somewhere else, it is the Wanderlust leather in butterscotch with, I believe, it's either the white or the cream elastic. I do think it's white though because it is pretty bright. It's 4 years old, so I can't really remember. But I also have on the front of it a Coeco gel roller. This is the natural coconut with a silver clip. And I just like to keep that on the front so that when I go to journal in the morning, I can just grab my pen and start. I'm not searching for a pen when I'm half awake. I'm not gonna go through like my actual pages, but on the inside, I do just use these little pocket moleskin cahiers. They come in a set of 3. I have a bunch of them. I have some craft ones, some gray ones, and I just kind of switch them out as I need to. And yeah, that's what I write in. I mainly use this journal in the morning, and I really like using it with the structure of morning pages, which is a exercise from the novel The Artist's Way. I really liked it as a new journaler because it allowed me to kind of have a number of pages I had to actually write every day, and it allowed me to kind of set a specific checkpoint I had to meet every morning, which really encouraged me to actually write. Of course, I use a very small journal, and I do that purposely because I don't want to be writing in my journal for a really long time, but I do find doing 3 pages of this in the morning is a really great way to just start my day off on a good note, and it doesn't take very much time. I usually use this for about 10 to 15 minutes. Moving on from this journal, I'm gonna go on to my next one. By the way, if you guys have any questions about any of the journals, just leave them down below and I'd be happy to answer them. This journal is my reading journal, book journal, book bujo. I didn't even know people had book bullet journals, but you learn something new every day, let me tell you. I keep notes on books I read in this journal. I'm a really big reader, and especially with nonfiction books, when I read something that either a quote that resonates with me or a lesson that I think is really important, I like to be able to write it down so that I can reference it later, because I've had situations where I haven't written down notes in books, and then I've tried to remember something from a book and I've ended up having to leaf through the entire book, and then I don't even find the thing I'm looking for. So I find a good way to avoid that is to just kind of take notes on the book as I'm reading it, so that I keep all the information that I want to reference maybe at a later point in a more accessible form. My book notebook is actually a A6 Stalogy. As you can see, A6 is one of the smaller sizes. It's actually the smallest size of this notebook, and I keep it in this undyed leather notebook cover. This is actually by the brand Graphic Image New York. I got this locally in Toronto at Leywines, but I believe you can also get it on their website, and it is called the Tom Journal. So an undyed leather is essentially a leather that actually will darken over time with exposure to sun and the oils from your hands. So it's a really beautiful piece because it truly molds and customizes to your use over time, which is super cool. Pretty much I use this journal to record notes on books I read. I have a bit of a specific structure for my book notes, and I'm not going to go over that now, but if you want me to, I would be happy to do that in a separate video. But so far I've been really enjoying this notebook because it makes referencing books so much easier, so much easier. So my next notebook is my most important notebook. As I mentioned earlier, if I was stuck on a desert island and I could only bring one notebook with me, I would bring this. And this is essentially my bullet journal, or everyday carry, I've heard people call it. This is essentially my agenda. Let's just go with that. Just like my book journal, this is a Stalogy notebook, except this is in a bigger size. This is their B6 size, which is about a 5x7 size notebook. So compared to your classic Moleskine or Leuchtturm, it is a bit smaller, which I really like because it's a bit more travel friendly without compromising on writing space. So for me, it's the best of both worlds. I keep my journal in this leather cover. This is by the brand Sojourner, and it's also an undyed leather. So as you can see, these are both the same type of leather, but one of them has darkened considerably because I got this probably 4 months before this one. And it will actually probably darken to this color eventually, which is really cool. If you guys are curious about the exact type of notebook cover this is the Sojourner B6 folio with the scoop front pocket, and it's in the triple natural. So it has a natural pocket, a natural exterior, and then a natural interior. I really like this notebook cover because I can hold all of my supplies in the front. These are my go-to supplies. I don't really use anything else in my journal. I have some page flags here. I have another Kaweco gel roller pen. I have a fine liner, and I also have a calligraphy pen. If you want to see more about my bullet journaling, I do have a couple videos on my setups and plan with me, so I'll put those in a card up above for you to check out if you so desire to. Oh, and I do have a couple pages in here that coincide with other notebooks. I don't really like to have any overlap, but for example, I will have some things recorded in here that might not be recorded in another notebook but are a similar topic. So for example, this is my reading log for 2020. I want to kind of see how many books I can read every year and how many I read each month. This doesn't overlap with my book notebook because this is simply for notes on books. Obviously, I could look at this in my index and see what books I've read every year, but I wanted to kind of record it in this journal because I wanted it to be something separate and something that stood out a bit more to me, because this is something I want to be kind of reminding myself to reference. One thing I found when I was journaling was I would try to do expense trackers, and personally, I just never really felt comfortable kind of having information about my spending in a journal that I was carrying around with me to classes and to other places. I've never ever lost a journal in my life, but you never know what can happen, and I just didn't want that information out there. So that kind of transitions into my last notebook, which is my finance notebook. So this fully came out of the need that I personally didn't feel super comfortable having my financial information in a notebook that I was bringing with me on the go. So I decided to put it in a separate notebook. This is an A5 Stalogy. Yeah, it looks the same as all the other ones. This is your standard size notebook. This is very similar to a Leuchtturm or a Moleskine. And I have this in a Stride Ridge English bridal cover. This is actually a Hobonichi cover, but it fits the Stalogy quite nicely. It has a receipt pocket in the back and a couple card slots in the front, which I usually keep gift cards in here and then receipts in here. I use this to record any financial reports that I want to take notice of. I don't actually look at transaction information here. I record that on a separate Excel document, but any type of monthly spending recaps or anything like that goes into this notebook. So that is my overall system. Just to quickly recap, I have my long form journal where I do my morning pages. I have my book journal, book bullet journal, book notes notebook. I have my bullet journal, which is my everyday planner. And I also have my financial notebook just so I can keep all that information a little more secure at home. If you do want a separate flip through of any of the notebooks I went over, there is one already for this setup. Is obviously not flip through because it's January, so there's not much of a difference there. But for any of these, if you want to see a separate video where I go over the setup in a bit more detail, please let me know and I'd be happy to get on that. And besides that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.